Hi, welcome back, everybody. Today, I want us to explore something a little different. Today, I want us to talk about why we drink, right? What are the causes of alcoholism? As I hinted at during last week's episode, I have, as I've researched, as I've learned more about addiction and alcoholism, and the fact that research says that there are genetic causations to addiction and alcoholism. I started to wonder, was I born to be an alcoholic, having been born of an alcoholic father? Are there other causes that were already setting me up for failure before I even knew about it? And so today, let's talk a little bit about what causes people to drink. Why do I drink? Why do I feel the need to drink so much at any given point in time? And I'm going to share with you a couple of stories along the way. Welcome back to our channel, The Wandering Wanderer, with me, your host, Wendy. I'm hoping this is becoming like one of your favorite channels to watch, right? Yeah, I'm trying. But welcome. Thank you for giving me your time today. Thank you for spending time with me. And thank you for commenting and giving me your feedback on and offline. I really appreciate all of those because this is a work in progress. We're all trying, right? And so let's dive right into it and talk about why I think we've established over the last few episodes that addiction is complex. It's not as simple as people have led you to believe or have talked about or make it sound like, yeah, you can drink and you can stop whenever we want. We now know there's biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors that make people drink. Some of the root causes and contributing factors to alcoholism are what we're going to delve into today. And the first one that we're going to look into is the first, before we delve into it, I want to say these about these factors. For a lot of us, it's a combination of factors and not just one that makes us more predisposed to alcoholism or more likely to get addicted than other people. There are people, let's be honest, who can spend their entire lives having one beer or one glass of wine, even every day, and never have any issues with alcoholism. But unfortunately, data says that that's a very small percentage of the global population. For a lot of people, alcoholism continues to be a problem globally, not just in Africa, but all over the world. And so the first of these factors that I want us to look into is genetics. I grew up with a parent, my father, who was an alcoholic. And when I talk about alcoholism, I mean the whole 9 yards. I mean the whole drinking to a stupor. I mean the whole 9 yards, right? All of the issues we talked about last week was sort of encompassed. And so growing up for me, alcohol was always within reach, number one. But also I saw it. I saw the effects of it. I saw what it meant to live in a home with an addict. And for those of you who do live with addicts, you know that it's not easy. And so, do genetics play a role? Research suggests that genetics do play a significant role in the development of alcoholism. Individuals with a family history of alcoholism are 75% more likely to become addicts themselves. Genes related to alcoholism, neurotransmitter function, this is all really technical jargon, and the reward pathways we get. You know that feel good feeling when you get when you exercise or when you drink or when you use drugs? That rapid rise of that feel good are called reward pathways in the brain, have been implicated in the risk of alcoholism. However, and I said this in the last episode, and I want to repeat it just for emphasis, not everyone who grows up in an environment with alcoholic family members develop alcoholism. There's people who, because of that, swear off alcohol and they never develop a problem with it because they look at it and they're like, I never want to be like that. And they make a conscious decision and put more of an effort to not find themselves falling into that hole. This is a very hard choice to make, but a lot of people make it every day, and that is super awesome. And so, just because you grew up in an alcoholic household or a house with alcoholics does not mean you will necessarily become one. It does mean you have higher chances of becoming one. Environmental factors play a huge role in determining whether you'll develop addiction or not. And so that's the next thing I want to talk about: the environment that you find yourself in, your family dynamics, peer influences, your socioeconomic status, access to alcohol. All of these things can shape my and your drinking behavior. Growing up in a household where alcohol use is normalized, or experiencing peer pressure and needing to be in a group and needing to fit into your social group, can increase the likelihood that somebody will develop alcoholism. In adults, stressful life events, divorce, unemployment, trauma can also trigger or make people want to drink more than they usually drink as a coping mechanism. I remember growing up, I had this once, and it always stuck with me. Alcohol is like a faithful mistress. She's never gonna turn you away. Like, alcohol is always gonna be there for you. It doesn't judge you, it doesn't reject you. It always lets you, as you consume it, you feel like I can put my problems away for a little bit, and I don't have to deal with them. Problem is, when you get so dependent on needing that coping mechanism in alcohol, it comes at a price. The third factor that I want us to talk about is psychological factors. In the recent years, especially after COVID, we were talking about mental health and psychological factors and how they affect people for a long time. But I think COVID made it a little bit more of a reality of we do need to start thinking more about our mental health. We need to start taking care of ourselves a little bit more, and we need to prioritize it, because almost every facet of our lives is our health decisions, our food decisions, our relationships are all affected by where our mind is at a particular point in time. Being mentally healthy. We used to think mental disorders meant schizophrenia and bipolar and those things that need medication, but more and more we're realizing sometimes it's just being in a healthy space, in a place where your state of mind is not constantly running, you're not constantly feeling like you are losing your mind, like you're barely hanging on. And I think, looking around me, whether it's on social media or just around me, a lot of us are struggling with mental health issues. A lot of us are struggling with loneliness. A lot of us are struggling with just being down in the dumps and feeling like this isn't working. A lot of us are struggling with unemployment. A lot of us are feeling alone in a world where we're supposed to be more and more socially connected. We're feeling more and more socially isolated. And these just create an environment where alcohol just seems like the friend you don't seem or don't feel like you have. And in addition to that, those who do have the medical mental health issues are three times more likely to develop a problem with alcoholism as they self-medicate using alcohol. We're talking about issues like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, personality disorders. That's what I was talking about, bipolar, and all of these can contribute to the dependence and maintenance of alcoholism. People use alcohol as self-medication because they're like, I don't want to take the pharmacy medication. I don't want to take the medication that the hospital has given or the doctor has given me, because again, alcohol is this thing that makes you feel like I'm human for a few hours, or I feel like I'm normal for a little bit, and I don't feel like I I don't fit. I don't feel like the puzzle piece that doesn't fit when I drink alcohol. Unfortunately, when you sober up and your problems that didn't really go away come back rushing at you, you feel the need to want to keep running back to alcohol. And eventually, the effects that we've already discussed just get worse and worse and worse. And that cycle of mental health and mental imbalance, it doesn't end up getting any better because we're not coping with the issues that need to be dealt with. We're running away from them. We've also established that a lot of us started drinking or were introduced to alcohol or tested alcohol, one thing or the other, a lot earlier in life, right? Like early teenage years. And this is seen as a major contributing factor to leading to addiction. So, early exposure to alcohol increases the chances that you'll become an alcoholic or you will become addicted to alcohol and drugs. If you are initiated during adolescence, especially because it's such a delicate time, the body is developing, the brain is developing, the risk is increased almost 100-fold of developing dependence on alcohol to function at basic life skills. The teenage brain is still maturing. And with these changes, decision making, impulse control, and risk assessment get developed when you're a teenager. And so when you start drinking during this time, it disrupts those developmental processes. And so you're unable to you're unable to learn, which is what should be happening around that point in time, how to make important decisions without alcohol, how to critically think through before making any decisions without alcohol. And when you're so dependent on alcohol to do all of these, again, the seeds have been planted for alcohol, for lifelong addiction and battling addiction into adulthood, because as a teenager it becomes harder and harder as you grow older to start making decisions in a better way if you've never learned how to do it properly in a balanced way. You've never learned to do it in a way where you learn that actions have consequences, and because of that you find yourself constantly making what society considers wrong decisions because you don't know what you've never known anything else, right? The other influence that I want us to talk about is social and cultural influences. I touched a little bit on this when I shared my story, but also when I started. When you grow up in an environment where alcohol is everything you do, there's alcohol involved. Social gatherings have alcohol. Happy occasions, sad occasions, everything in between has alcohol. If alcohol consumption is so ingrained in social rituals and considered a rite of passage, people face greater pressure to drink excessively. Now, I've been thinking of a story and I've been wondering whether to share it with you. But I remember a couple, years ago before I quit, we were invited to a friend's home. And the couple that we were visiting were Kenyan, and a bunch of us were Kenyans, and we're going. They had invited us to their home to share a meal and yeah, just hang out. And it's easy when you're going to someone's house, pick up a nice bottle of wine and go with it. And I remember as I walked in, the head of the home, the guy who is a pastor, was then and still is a pastor, said, "I don't allow alcohol in my home. Please go put that in the car or put it down somewhere, but you cannot enter into my home with alcohol." And I remember there's a bunch of us Kenyans. His rule, his house, his rules. Okay, so no problem with that. But I remember a bunch of us Kenyans like going back with the alcohol we brought and putting it in one of the cars, and we were all grumbling because we were like, "What do you mean? Like, we're here for a social event, and you're telling us your home, you're not, we can't get into your home with alcohol." And as I reflected on that, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, I was thinking about it. I was like, I realize now that it was a reflection of the rest of us, the visitors into the home, how much we had grown accustomed to being in a social event with alcohol that we could not imagine at 2 p.m. in the afternoon going into someone's home and having a social gathering that did not include alcohol, especially because we were all Kenyans and alcohol is sort of kind of just a part of our lives, a part of our everyday lives. And I think when I think about it now, it's just a reflection of who we were and who we thought we should be. And I think a lot of us at the time was like, how dare this guy tell us we can't come in with alcohol? Like, are we going to have an entire afternoon gathering without alcohol? And we did. We had a wonderful afternoon with tea and snacks and food. There was so much food. The kids had fun. And it wasn't when I got sober, is when I started thinking about that, the decision that they consciously made to tell people coming into their home, you cannot come into my home with alcohol. It's taking a stand on a value that they held dear. And I think a lot of us at that time didn't take the time to reflect and think about it. But now that I do, I really admire them for having made that choice, because they were non-drinkers, and it was a value for them, an important value for them to uphold, to not allow people to come into their home with alcohol. And so social norms surrounding alcohol use, where you drink to celebrate, you drink to cope with stress, you drink to be happy, you drink when you're sad, you drink when you're playing a game, you drink any excuse to drink, basically, influences patterns of alcohol consumption and contribute in such a major way to the development of alcoholism. The other factor that we need to think about is personality traits. There are certain people who have certain personality traits that make them more susceptible to addiction, especially alcohol, because it feels temporary. It feels like you have control because you drink and the next day you're sober, except for the hangover, and you kind of feel like I've got control over this. And those personality traits include impulsivity, sensation seeking, and risk taking behaviors. These are all associated with increased risk of alcoholism. It needs to be said that a lot of these are associated with the younger generation. You know, when you're 18, 19, and you feel like the world is all mine, you're still optimistic. And sorry, do I sound jaded? I think I sounded a bit jaded there. But when you're 18, 19, and you feel like you're so optimistic and the world is before you and you can achieve anything you want to, at that time is where some of these behavioral traits start to come out, especially in a world of social media where everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame. Those behaviors increase the risk of alcoholism and addiction, because people with these inherent traits are more likely to engage in heavy drinking and develop problematic drinking patterns. Additionally, low levels of self control and self esteem and difficulty in regulating emotions can contribute to alcohol misuse and dependence. I've paused there when I said self esteem because I think one of the biggest triggers that I've come across, or one of the things that make people drink, when I'll tell you my own experience. When I drank, I felt so much confidence. I felt this flow of confidence. I felt like, now it's okay when I can be seen. I have confidence. I had some of the best philosophical conversations. I danced. I naturally love to dance, but I'm super self conscious. But then when I drank, I didn't feel self conscious. I was like, yes, I felt braver when I drank. I realize now those were other issues that I needed to deal with, and I should have dealt with them. And to be quite frank, I'm still dealing with them. But alcohol gave me a place where I could be bigger than I thought I ever could be. And it was comforting for a while until it wasn't. This next factor is delicate. And so I'll try to put the words best I can. And this is trauma and stress. I am not sure there is an adult out here roaming the streets who has not experienced some level of trauma. Some of us have gone through so much trauma, and some of us have gone through a little trauma. And there is never, and there should never be a competition of trauma of, oh my God, you had it so much worse than me, blah, 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 and all of that. I think everyone's level of trauma is different. Everyone's experiences are different. And it's important to respect everyone's experiences from where they are and where they came from. Did some people have it way worse than others? Absolutely. But again, it's not a competition. How trauma affects us is so different. And physical, sexual abuse, neglect, violence, all of those things are traumatic and they mark you for life, right? There's times, I said this to a friend of mine once. There's times I said in my life, I wish I could have a lobotomy to remove certain memories from my brain. But that's not how it works. If I had a lobotomy, I'd probably lose all of the good stuff too, not just the bad stuff. And so trauma does increase the the possibility of addiction, because sometimes we want to forget. Sometimes we want to forget the traumas that we've gone through. When statistics say that 1 in 3 women has been essayed in their lifetime, that's trauma beyond words. When we hear stories of children growing up neglected, when we hear, and I think this age of social media has made it more possible for people to tell their stories. And some of these stories will move you to tears, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how that person survived that and how they're still standing. And so trauma can has an impact, such a profound impact on mental health, and increases the risk of alcoholism. Traumatic experience also lead to things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other trauma-related disorders, which are often linked to alcohol misuse as a coping mechanism. You know, when we were talking about self-medicating just a little bit earlier, this is one of those things, because we don't want to accept that we're depressed, we're anxious, or that we've never dealt with the trauma of growing up in certain circumstances or experiencing certain things that have marked us for life. Chronic stresses, work-related stress, financial difficulty, which a lot of us are going through right now. So many people in the world right now are in financially difficult spaces. Relationship problems. I will not get into the stats of divorces and just how many relationship issues are budding and showing up all around the world. All of these things can contribute to the onset and progression of alcoholism. Number 8 is more of a subsequent effect, but exacerbates the addiction and the problem with alcohol, and that is brain chemistry. Alcohol affects the brain neurotransmitters. It literally affects how your brain works. And so when you think about the chemicals in your brain, dopamine, serotonin, all of those big words, these big words that I just said are involved in mood regulation, pressure, and inhibitory control. Alcoholism leads to the brain altering how it works and how these systems function. That's how you become so tolerant that you can drink a whole bottle of whiskey and not get affected. That's why addiction becomes, you become so dependent on alcohol that your brain cannot function without it, and you need more and more alcohol to experience the same effects. That's why for a lot of us, you start with 1 beer is fine, it gets you high. Then 2 beers after that. And after a while, 4 beers doesn't do anything for you. And that's why it's almost always progressive when you think about it. A lot of us started really small, and we got to the point where you're mixing 4 different types of alcohol in the same night just to get that rush, that effect of, now I'm feeling that buzz, as we call it, or that high, or that feeling where you can do anything, right? We've said it over and over again. Alcoholism is complex, it's multifaceted, and so many factors affect it. And often it's a mix of these factors, because when I think of myself, I think genetics played a role in it. I think social and cultural played a role in it. And I think trauma, stress, and anxiety of just everyday life played a role in me getting addicted and me finding myself in that situation of not knowing how to function without alcohol. So there is no one cause. It's almost always an interplay of multiple causes. And each one of us needs to find what their root cause is, seek for help, and find help that is tailored to your particular needs. And so I think this covers what we've done in the last few episodes, covers the basics of alcohol and addiction and what causes it and what its various forms are. Next week, I want us to start talking about sobriety. I want us to start seeing what sobriety is, what its benefits are, and how to get from the point of addiction and step by step into sobriety. I'll give you some coping skills. I'll give you some tips and tricks that I personally use, and I hope this will be of use to you. So join me next week for that. I'm going to wrap up today's episode by saying, I think one of the biggest lies that has been perpetuated, not by necessarily by society, but sometimes by us as people who are addicted. And in a world where, as I said, social media makes us feel more lonely than anything else, is that you're alone, is that you're fighting alone, is that there's nobody fighting with you and there's nobody on your side. It doesn't matter if you don't have a family, if you're an orphan, all of this, so many life circumstances that can make you feel like that. I can tell you right now, you are never alone. Look around you. You never walk alone. I need someone today to hear that when I say it. You are not alone. It may feel like you are alone. It may feel like you're fighting alone, but you're not. I was in a place where I thought I had nobody. Yet I had so many people around me who cared, but I had shut my eyes in such a way that I did not feel like they could see me, that I could be myself with them. I did not think I could show my weaknesses because I thought they would judge me and make me feel worse. Are there people who did that? Of course, there are. That's humans. But I also discovered that there was a circle of people who loved me just as I am. Stop shutting people out. Start letting people in. Not everybody, okay? Not everybody, but look around you. You're never alone and you never walk alone. I hope you can believe and trust that. It might take a little bit of work for you to get out of that space, but reach out a hand. Reach out a hand. Somebody will grab you, somebody will help. There's so many resources, so much help. All you got to do is let yourself be vulnerable and ask. That's where I'm going to wrap it up today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. If you want to keep wondering and wondering with me, I will see you next week. Comments down below, feedback. What more do you want to hear from me? If you have your stories and you want me to share them, please drop me a mail. If you have challenges or situations you'd like advice on, I'm also a life coach. So share those with me, and maybe our audience can also be able to give you some advice. And today I'm gonna wrap it up a little differently. You're never alone. Remember that. And taking one step at a time sometimes is all it takes to begin a new journey for a brighter future. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And once again, thank you for your time. See you next week.